Hey there everyone, I'm Marcia Yates, your art teacher, and let's talk about assignment number 2. Assignment number 2 is very similar to assignment number 1. However, there is something that's different. This time, I'm going to choose the element of art for you to focus on, and I'm going to choose it based on what you showed me for assignment number 1. So if your assignment showed me a bunch of art elements and it was really good, but there was one missing, that's probably the one I'm going to choose. For example, let's say you included everything on the list here except texture. It would have to be texture. That would be your focus for assignment number 2. Many times students in this class don't choose form for their first element of art to illustrate, so I choose it in the second drawing. Understand that whatever I choose is probably going to be a little bit harder for you than the first drawing, but that's okay because we're here to learn. And you can ask me any questions you want as you work on this in class or later as you work on the drawing between classes. You can text me questions during the week and I'll answer them as quickly as possible. Everything else is the same. Use any of the materials that you used for the first drawing. So enjoy yourself and let's get started. Whoa, hold on just a minute, everybody. There was one more thing I wanted to talk about. I want to talk to you about negative space and show you a few examples before we begin this assignment, because sometimes I do assign negative space, and I don't think we've talked enough about that yet. I'm going to show you a few examples. In the first example of hands, there's space that's created that looks like background, and it's white with gold lines in it. That space is negative space because it looks kind of empty and it looks like background, but it is part of the picture and it's really important for the rest of the picture. Our third example is an Egyptian relief carving. All of the gold areas are positive space and the negative space is the background, which is black. That is not part of the sculpture. It's empty, it's negative, it's nothingness. Our next example includes a ladder, and if you look at the space between the steps, that space looks like background, and it is, but it's also negative space. It looks like nothing, but when you start to look at the picture more carefully, the negative space is really important because it makes the picture more interesting. If it was all filled up everywhere, then it would be harder to look at. And that might make a good picture too. Our next example is a portrait of folded papers. And these particular folded papers are glued on, and the space in between them is unused, which makes it negative space. These folded shapes create the portrait. The Escher Lithograph shown here has negative space in between the branches reflected in the water and around the fish. All of these spaces look like nothingness in the water, but they're very important to the positive or used space. Negative space does not mean bad. It just means unused or background or nothingness as part of a picture. Our last two examples are murals on buildings, and these murals are perfect. They are not painted on walls that have been partially destroyed. They are in fact, illusions. The negative space is in the destroyed part of the mural, where it looks like there's air and objects in the inner part of the building. But that's all an illusion. It's a really creative use of negative space. Very clever. I don't expect you to create something that looks like any of these. Thank you again for listening and for all your effort.